Welcome everyone tuning in from across Asia and Europe to our session on What's the Future of People and Work in Society 5.0. This webinar is co-hosted by us here at the Asia Europe Foundation alongside our partners from the Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies and the TechForGoodInstitute. For those that don't know, my name is Freya Chalpool. I'm ASEF's Youth Project Lead, and I will be your host today as we explore what lies ahead for people and work in this very rapidly evolving era. Before we begin, here's a quick rundown of what we will be looking at today, who you'll be hearing from. So we have a 90-minute session. I will kick off with a very brief introduction to frame our discussion. We will then hear from our keynote presenter, Ms. Tamira Snell. Following that, we'll open up to a panel discussion and a Q&A featuring our distinguished speakers who will be sharing their perspectives on the future of work, skills, and the day-to-day experience of people in Society 5.0. So some reminders that during the Q&A, you are invited to share your questions and comments. Please use the Q&A and the chat functions on Zoom. You can upvote, you can respond to questions, you can engage and reply to other participants, and feel free also to chat in the chat function, get to know each other. You can share your LinkedIn profiles in case you wish to network further. And we'll also run a live poll during the session to encourage you to add your voice to the mix as well. So I think we can dive in to set the scene. As many of you know, ASEF is an intergovernmental organization devoted to building bridges between Asia and Europe. Through our work, our aim is to foster collaboration and to co-create solutions between government and civil society partners and stakeholders. And this is one of our flagship projects, the ASEF Young Leaders Summit, which through this we aim to bring together really talented young leaders across both regions to learn and to grow together. This session itself is part of our knowledge building phase for the 6th edition of the project. We have 80 selected young leaders joining us today, but we're also very happy to have opened this session up to a wide audience. So it's great to see over 90 of you here today to join us. For the last 3 years, ASEF has explored this topic of leadership in Society 5.0, aiming to empower youth for a human-centric future, balancing technology, economic progress, as well as social well-being. And this webinar series, spans 3 core themes that we wanted to address: the economy, the environment, and people and work. We know these are very, very broad, big scope questions and topics to explore, but we want to provide some inspiration to you all in these areas. And today's speakers bring really wide-ranging insights into these areas. We hope their perspectives really spark ideas and discussions that you will be carrying forward to all of your peers and your communities. So I think that's enough from me to start with. I'm very happy to begin with our keynote presentation to set the stage for our topic of people and work. So please allow me to welcome Ms. Tamira Snell, who is an accomplished advisor and keynote speaker specializing in future behaviors, lifestyles, and consumer patterns. She has a foundation in cultural sociology with a focus on deciphering the nuances of human behavior, societal trends, and the cultural underpinnings that shape our lives. Her strategic experience spans sectors, industries, and geographies, allowing her to understand the interconnected webs and cross-fertilizations of trends and future implications effectively. She has a master's in culture and media and a bachelor's in sociology and cultural studies. Thank you so much for joining us, Tamira. I will stop sharing my screen and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to sharing a bit of the way that we are working with this very broad topic that you also said yourself, Raya, on people and work. I know that my other colleagues have been also been part of the previous sessions. So based in Copenhagen, Europe, but I have previously also worked in and lived in Kuala Lumpur. So I had the pleasure of also really traveling around in primarily Southeast Asia. So super happy to be here. But let me start to share my screen. with you. There you go. So this session will be on the future of people and work. And I would like to begin with also an example of how we typically also approach the future. Not just with people and work, but it actually becomes more challenging when it involves people as well and our abilities to imagine a future. And that is because our way of thinking and our way of imagining and making assumptions is typically built around the things where we can more easily and more tangibly see a direction of a potential future. So this example is from a magazine from 1956. It's an American magazine, and they did an entire issue on "This Is Your Future," they called it, where they tried to imagine what the future would be like, or life would be like, how society would evolve and people would live and work in the year 2000. So actually already 25 years ago. And they actually managed to do a lot of very precise predictions when it came to technology and the smart home development with interconnected devices and everything. So they predict the flat screen TV. They also predicted glass walls, a robot vacuumer, and also interconnected kitchen digital devices. One of my favorites is the phonovision receiver, as they called it, which you can see on the right, which was, their way of predicting how we would communicate in completely different ways, and also with images and visuals. However, what they completely I don't know if they neglected it or were just too biased to actually be able to imagine was how we would change as people. So they remember this issue is from the 1950s. It was still the same gender roles where the husband would come back home from work after a long day at the office, and the women would be, the caregivers at home, not working. And also in terms of our lifestyle and health values, we had completely different attitudes to it. For instance, smoking inside the home. You can see that the grandfather is smoking next to the grandchild watching TV. So this is what we really need to be aware of when we are navigating future, plausible futures. And the reason why that is that when we engage in futures and society 5.0 or other topics, we seem to be likely to underestimate the long-term implications. It's difficult for us. If we look at a mega trend like urbanization, and I show you how Shenzhen looked like in 1980, it becomes very difficult for us to imagine a Shenzhen in 2016, for instance, and how that will fundamentally change our lives completely, the values, our behaviors, our lifestyles, ways of working, etc. Now, I want to also show another example, which is from the early days of the internet and how we also completely underestimated the long-term implications. I hope it will work out.
But I think about this, and what about this internet thing? Do you know anything about that?
Sure.
What the hell is that exactly?
Well, it's become a place where people are publishing information.
Right.
So everybody can have their own homepage. Companies are there, the latest information. It's wild what's going on. You can send electronic mail to people. It is the big new thing.
Yeah, but it's easy to criticize something you don't fully understand, which is my position here.
Go ahead.
But I can remember a couple of months ago, there was like a big breakthrough announcement that on the internet or on some computer deal, they were going to broadcast a baseball game. You could listen to a baseball game on your computer. And I just thought to myself, does radio ring a bell?
So you can see that he's actually comparing it to radio and having really not understood, or at least underestimating the long-term implications. Another thing which we strongly advocate is important when we're trying to think about futures of people and work is also how we tend to forget that decline is also an option. In the present zeitgeist, this is something that is becoming much more of an awareness, but nevertheless, it is something where we cannot think about the linearity in terms of how we will live and how we will work. There will always be frictions and tensions that will affect this. Good. I will quickly move on. One of the first things I would like also to engage you in is this thought that when we're standing here in the present, this actually used to be the unimaginable future. So I would like you to reflect quickly. Just take, I think, 30 seconds or so to try to think about what did you not imagine 10 years ago would be part of our everyday lives and ways of living and working today. What has happened that you really did not imagine? And the second question is, if you try to look forward, say also 10 years from now, what could be an unimaginable future? And think about events or ways of life and behaviors. What do you really think would be completely unimaginable? So I'll just stop sharing my screen for a moment, and then I will ask Freya to set up the poll, please.
Yes, we'll launch the poll. You should be able to see it on your screen now. I see some answers coming in. We'll give it a couple more seconds, I think, for answers to be submitted. I think you want the very first things that are coming to people's minds, right, Tamira? Your first reactions.
That'll be great. Otherwise, we can keep on thinking and reflecting for the rest of the day.
Yeah, I think you can spend a lot of time thinking about these questions. Okay, we have a handful of answers. I think we can end the poll, but if you have any other answers, feel free to pop them into the chat function as well to discuss with each other. In the meantime, I'm going to press end now and get the results up. Give me a second to get a hold of the results.
And I know I think it's very big questions to also ask at the end of the afternoon for most of you. I believe it's 4 o'clock. But still, I think it's super important to keep this in mind also, that we cannot just look at the world from the present.
Okay, give me 1 second. I will find these results.
I'm curious to see your reflections and also share what people tend to bring up in these reflections. Just let me know, Freya, when you think that you have.
Maybe you want to share if you have any thoughts in the meantime on these questions.
Yeah, well, I think that for the first one, we've had a lot of participants in other settings where they've said that, for instance, the pandemic was something, and the way that it changed their lives and also their work lives to being much more digital and changing their social relationships and keeping a distance for a long period of time. That was something that they couldn't have imagined 10 years ago. Obviously, depending on different places in the world, but still. And I think when looking ahead, a lot of the participants that I'm engaging with are often mentioning the role of AI and the opportunities, and also how that might change our worlds completely, and how we will navigate being a family, being having relationships, working, etc., etc. So, but I don't know, Freya, if you have...
Do indeed. Okay, so what Zoom has done is taken the keywords from the short answers. So you can see a couple of the keywords that were shared.
Yeah, and there I can already see the COVID, so the pandemic. ChatGPT, yes, I think that is also something that has been a bit of a surprise for many of us. And then phones, obviously, being such a big, back to the example from I showed you with Bill Gates and the rise of the internet and being online and on our phones being such a big part of our lives. If you can you switch to the next one, Freya?
Yes. There we go.
And robots, yes, yeah. And how, what does it say? The connections, yeah, and the cooperation, and so also a lot of how we might, yeah, that it will be difficult to imagine how we will work. I think actually I was on a what do you call that, an academic inspiration tour, and this I went to Sweden, and he was called Mr. AI. Or IoT, and he said that actually when it came to quantum computing, he was like, that is a big unimaginable what will happen here. Yeah. But still also robots I can see mentioned a couple of times.
I like the word revolution here as well.
Yeah, that's yeah. There's a lot of friction going on in the geopolitical as well, so revolution can mean many different places, many different things. Yeah. But if you will allow me to share my presentation again, then
back to you, Tamira.
Thank you. Let's see. Good. So thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. And I think since today's lecture or keynote is really about people and work, I really want to stress the point that when we think about futures, and also when we think about, for instance, technology, that it's really important to include this people aspect, which is less graspable at times in terms of how we will change. But nevertheless, we are an inherent part of every future. And this example is from Songdo, which is one of the first smart cities, where the intention was to really build the smartest city of them all, and everything was thought of in terms of technology and digital possibilities. However, in the end, their main challenge was actually to have people move there and make them feel that this was a home, and feel that they had meeting places, and give them a sense of belonging. So when thinking about these new future worlds, including that aspect of actually that we still need to engage and we still need to feel some kind of community. And I know you've all seen this, because this is typically how we start to navigate an issue or a topic. So this is something that is closely related to our work and doing scenarios and defining uncertainties. And I know that Carsten also represented some of the uncertainties that he worked with in terms of economics, etc. And we always try to interlink these. And I think that is the important point, just showing you this briefly. So when it comes to people, it's also really important to look at, okay, we're seeing different tensions, we're seeing different frictions. Now, one of you mentioned the word revolution in terms of what is unimaginable. So looking into, how do we see the uncertainties when it relates to trust and safety, for instance, or when it comes to how we will identify ourselves or our aspirations. Will they be traditional, or will they be much more progressive? How do we see our cultural ways of belonging? Will that be globally oriented, as we've seen for many, many years, decades, in terms of globalization? Or will we shift to a much more local orientation, which we're starting to witness now, which has implications for both people and ways of working, but also for companies and for supply chains and for everything that is involved with being a global organization, for instance. So this is just to show you how our uncertainties when it comes to the more contextual issues are interlinked with the uncertainties we see on a more, you could call it micro level or behavioral level. And one of the mega trends that is also part of our the way that we are thinking about future worlds, future ways of living is definitely urbanization, because we're seeing a shift. And this is one of the mega trends that is more easy to measure or have a clear indication about how this will evolve. Obviously, urbanization will unfold in different ways. In different places in the world, but nevertheless, it will have an impact on the needs we will have as people, behaviors, how what will be the quality of life in these spaces, how will we socialize, and also how might we see some of the implication in terms of small and smart space living. Also in terms of this, the social belongingness and how we will, the more urbanized we will live, we will see a rising need for actually also finding ways for integrating nature into our everyday lives, and whether it will be urban gardenings or this is an example from a hospital in Singapore where they're growing produce on top of the roof. So finding ways to actually integrating that into our urban lives, we see as one of the potential consequences of urbanization. Then we have another in terms of demographic and how that will have an implication on us as people and our work lives. And now the question of what will be actually the constellation of a family. I can share with you that in Denmark, the national statistics, they already have 37 different constellations of family forms that they're using in their data sets. So the traditional family of 4 is still the primary one, but we will see many different ways of actually, also due to divorces, divorce rates, single living, etc., which is also the next point I have here in terms of what might affect people and work lives in the future. So the single person households is something that is rising worldwide and is projected to reach 35% by 2050. It is something that we see having quite an effect already. Also how we are our eating practices, for instance, how we wish to socialize, where we wish to socialize, etc., etc. And then another demographic key point that we are also super curious to understand and explore is obviously the aging population, which is also a mega trend, and what that will signify for Society 5.0. And I think it's really interesting that is one of my key messages, is that we tend to look at an aging population and say, oh, it's the 65 plus. But if we live longer and longer, and we live till we're about 90 or 100, we're kind of just clustering one big group of people into the same category, and that is problematic. We need to understand what it means to be a senior and the diversities, not just in age, but also in terms of different places and different types of living standards and quality of life. And also what that will mean for our retiree rates, etc., etc. And then another question that this also affects is obviously, well, everything is a fast-paced society. We talk about a speed society. We also talk about a liquid society. But will we allow also for this group of aging populations to actually have, possibilities for like for slowness, and not that they're the only ones that need it. There is a whole slow movement, but having like this example in Holland, the Netherlands, having like a slow checkout lane when doing groceries. So having these thoughts about what are the implications of the society that might unfold on the different groups of people living in this society. And there's definitely also a point being in what we are already measuring now in terms of, for instance, loneliness. If we see more single people living, older people living, having maybe lost their companion, what will be the need for actually feeling not to be alone? And we are seeing, and not, luckily not the majority of people feeling lonely, but still we are seeing shifts in that sense, also due to technology and our digital ways of living. So this is something that we often pinpoint, is that also our perception of health has changed from not just being about being healthy and not physically sick, but actually also being fit in the 80s, but also being much more holistic in terms of health is not just about physical fitness, but also being mentally healthy and feeling social well-being. And the question is then, how will that change going forward as well, and how will that affect Society 5.0 and people in our work lives? How might work change according to this changing health perception as well? Now, I already introduced that we often talk about liquid society. Liquid society is also very much linked to our digital lives being completely integrated with our physical lives. We often put this a bit on the edge by saying, if Maslow pyramids of needs, well, we've added 2 other basic layers to this. We've added that we need constant Wi-Fi access, and we need to make sure that we have battery life enough on our devices in order to, survive almost. So we are seeing a shift in how society works, and that obviously creates a greater interconnectedness, also expectations, and just a complete flow of everyday life that is constantly changing and becoming more seamless, and sometimes also with more friction when it's not seamless. And that also creates a lot of new areas of experiences or hyper realities. I don't know if you've seen this example of actually having holograms, but this is an example of a concert using holograms, gaining a lot of traction, a lot of feeling almost like a real performance with real people, even though ABBA is no longer doing real concerts. But this is something where we're looking into new types of realities that will be interesting also to explore when it comes to how we might work, how we might go about our everyday lives. And when it comes to work, already now we're seeing a shift in terms of, okay, where are we actually working in this liquid society? And this is IKEA a year ago, who actually had a job offering within the metaverse, where they would help sell their famous meatballs, but also having a team trying to build their presence and also their offering within this liquid society or online metaverse or world. So we see that our everyday lives have already become fluid, and that is definitely something that is also affecting how we think about livability versus affordability, and also how we see that maybe also largely due to a pandemic pushing it forward, but how our digital ways of working has also been made possible. And in all this, what we typically come back to is that we still need to kind of understand that we are not all the same. We have now a new generation called Generation Beta being born from this year and onwards. And we need to understand what kind of cultural context they were born into, how they grew up, how did that inform their values, even though this is not rigid either, but also how did that inform their ways of using communication means and navigating this digitalization of both the world and everyday lives that we see. And for doing that, to try kind of understand how we should understand or explore possible futures when it comes to behaviors and behavioral patterns of people and work, for instance, it is really about trying to, a bit like the exercise I did in the beginning, and now I'm slowly wrapping up, but how have we been informed by our past contexts, our cultural values and traditions and rituals? What narratives have informed us here? And what kind of patterns and do we see already now in the present? And how can we then build on that to look at the contextual drivers, like the megatrends, for instance, or scenarios or uncertainties, and look what will inform us and might help us anticipate new needs and new ways of working, etc., etc. So to just bring it back to how I started with the family, we are still making the same mistakes when we try to envision or to imagine how the future family would be. This is just a simple Google search today, when writing family of the future. And it becomes this kind of very digital, glossy image, which becomes slightly too far removed from our present and our past. Because I think one of the a famous professor, Sarah Pink, she's trying to integrate ethnography with future studies. Our everyday lives in the future will still be mundane, like they are today. So it's about trying to understand how that might come about. So I think I will stop sharing now and go back to you guys, and hopefully I kept my time. I've tried to speed talk. But over to you, Freya.
Thank you, Tamira. That was really, really insightful. I think it's a lot of topics, but really lovely to have this cohesive view on different ways people's everyday lives will be affected by the changes, by the technological changes. I think it's a really nice starting point before we go into our panel discussion, which is next. So, Tamira, please stay with us on the screen as I invite our expert panelists to join the conversation. So first, let me introduce Ms. Subhashini Chandran, who has 25 years of experience driving inclusive growth, especially for small businesses and women-led enterprises. She's the Senior Vice President at MasterCard, where she oversees the center's programs, data and insights, strategic engagement, and partnerships. She's a Yale World Fellow, a Chevening Gurukul Fellow, and a Young Global Leader of the World Economic Forum. She previously led social impact at Yara International across Africa and Asia. Earlier in her career, she also actually expanded her own family's tea farm in South India into one of the country's largest privately owned tea companies, employing over 7,000 women, which is a great statistic, with degrees in economics and law, and she is a member of the Bar Council of India. Thank you, Shubha, for joining us today. Next, we have Mr. Poon King Wang, who is the director of the Lee Kuan Yew Center for Innovative Cities at the Singapore University of Technology and Design, SUTD, where he also leads the Smart Cities Lab, and the Future Digital Economies Initiative. He brings rich experience from both the public and private sectors, including roles at Singapore's Economic Development Board, Ministry of Law, and as head of business analytics at one of the country's largest banks. King Wong also serves as Senior Director of Strategic Planning at SUTD, co-director of the SUTD JTC Industrial Infrastructure Innovation Centre, and sits on the boards of several national and international bodies in smart cities and sustainability. With a background academically in electrical engineering and industrial engineering, as well as a rocket engineering certificate as well. Very fun fact that we wanted to share. And last but certainly not least, we welcome David Timmis, who's the Global Communications and Public Affairs Manager at Generation.org, one of the world's largest skilling and employment non-profits, where he leads global storytelling and EU-level advocacy. He's also a community champion for the Benelux and France region, co-lead for Shape Europe and Eurasia 2025, and a member of the Longevity Economy Task Force with the Global Shapers community. Previously, David led EU civics outreach at Google during 2019 and 2024 EU elections and served as Romania's UN youth delegate. So his experience spans public, private, and non-profit sectors as well, all with a focus on technology, workforce development, AI governance, and digital transformation. And my favorite fact about David is that he was actually an ASEF YLS alumnus as well in 2018. So he has been in your shoes as well. A warm welcome and thank you for all of you for joining us. I think your insights will be really invaluable across the spectrum of topics we have. A reminder to all of our audience that you can continue submitting your questions on the Q&A function. I'll be having a look back at them throughout. Interact with each other, and with that, I'll hand back to Tamira to moderate our panel. Thank you, Tamira.
Yeah, thank you for that great presentation. I've been looking so much forward to also hearing you present a little bit on yourself and what you wish to highlight in terms of this topic of the day. So would you start, Ms. Subashini?
Sure. Thank you, Tamira. So first of all, thanks so much to ASEF and Freya for the invitation. And I was just listening to you, Tamira, and the data you put out, and I thought every time you see some of this, and some of it was new to me as well, it's astounding. And a lot of that change is around the corner. So thank you for setting us up so nicely. So as Freya introduced me, I work a lot on inclusion. And so that's really what I'm preoccupied with. So to this group, I'd love to just sort of focus some of my sharing on what Society 5.0 will need to actually reach its place in a good way. And this is both my own personal point of view, but also that of MasterCard, is that we truly believe that we can only achieve a future state that is sustainable if everyone has access to the benefits of digital economy, including a closing of the digital divide. And I thought it was so telling that you put up the hierarchy and added these. It's the first time I've seen that. So that's very interesting that battery life and Wi-Fi will precede everything else, because it may become, sort of a medium through which to achieve to reach some of your basic needs in the future. And how scary is that for someone like me from where I sit? Because every day we are aware of the gap. And so for really all the incredibly wonderful young people in this in our audience today, just to give you a sense, right? And I was seeing the countries that were coming up in the chat. So many of you will be living this reality, or it will be around you. Many still struggle with the digital divide, which is the gap between education and the ability to effectively use the internet. That's really what it is. And this divide, as we call it, the digital divide, continues to leave billions behind. According to, sort of ITU, that's the International Telecommunication Union, 2.6 billion people, and that's 1/3 of the world, remain offline today. And so can you imagine, if that's the state today, what their state will be in the future, where we expect this to be a fundamental oxygen for performing and engaging in society? And this divide is more than infrastructure, right? So it's not just about countries that are today have political instability, that are not able to build out the infrastructure and lay the wiring, et cetera. It's about affordability. It's also about digital literacy. And it's about cultural barriers for women, for young people, in terms of being able to use. So for low-income communities, and that's a lot of the population set in Asia Pacific and EMEA, parts of which sort of I work on every day. The cost of a smartphone and data plan exceed a month's income. So to close the digital divide, the World Bank projects that you need 1.5 trillion in additional global GDP by 2030. That's not something that's going to happen unless we're very intentional and strategic in where we're channeling our investments and our strategies, right? And this closing the digital divide is also bridging the gap between poverty and alleviation out of poverty. So the pathway out of poverty for individuals and communities will be through closing the digital gap and divide. And today we don't have the will, I think, because we have the resources, we know how to do it. We just don't have the collective leadership will that we'll need to achieve that. It also means that opportunities for small businesses, that's a stakeholder group that I'm very interested in, that I work on every day, and that makes up anything from 60 to 99% of the economies that most of you live and work in every day. So it limits opportunities for small businesses to grow and scale. It also limits opportunity for resilient job creation, which we need, right? So we'll need to figure out how to close the digital divide, because that will alleviate poverty. It will create the opportunities for small businesses that we need for our countries to grow, and for resilience in terms of just job creation in a digital-first economy. So on the one side, many of our economies are moving towards that, and on the other side, we're leaving so many more behind. So that's really the dilemma. And so what's the solution? And I think that's the tragedy, because we know the solution. And it's going to take young leaders like yourselves across the several countries that you represent to be able to work together to help get us to where we need to in terms of policy and investment to get there, right? So we know that we need to make sure technology serves everyone. So that's access. So connectivity, which is really like, I said oxygen, just looking at tomorrow's slides, but it's oxygen, call it today's electricity. Without it, individuals and businesses cannot participate in the economy. So first, we need to solve the access problem, and that's about infrastructure, affordability, literacy, all of that, right? So we need leadership that is investing in affordable, reliable infrastructure and ensuring it reaches beyond urban to rural and underserved regions. Because a world in which there will be massive mega urban centers is coming. But until then, there is populations that are largely living in rural that, when they do migrate, are not skilled enough today to be able to access the opportunities in this mega urban living that's coming our way. Mm-hmm. Second is skills, of course, and third is the trust, right, that we need to build. As AI and digital platforms become more embedded in our lives, people need to trust these systems. So if you're not literate on this change and all these new transformative technologies, you're not going to be able to trust it. If you don't trust it, you're hesitant to use it. And we see women as a segment that I work on a lot as well, have massive hesitancy. And we also saw in COVID, when opportunity meets need, all that hesitancy vanishes and trust comes very rapidly. So we know that there's appetite and there's ability. So how do we invest in the skills and the awareness raising to be able to get them to trust? And the other side of that, and this is even countries like Singapore where I'm based, where for that trust to build, we need to make sure that systems are safe, secure, and transparent. Mm. Just last year in Singapore, over $1 billion were lost in scams, with the elderly being the largest target segment. So in an educated population, when something like this happens, trust is destroyed overnight. And to build that trust back, even in literate communities, becomes hard because they have suffered, right? So to also have the infrastructure that's safe and secure will be extremely important. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe I'll pause there for the moment and pick up later, because we're doing a few different things at Mastercard that could make for very interesting examples. But for the moment, I think, my big thought and insight is we need to solve the digital divide problem if we are truly going to make sure that 5.0 is inclusive and sustainable and works for everyone.
Thank you so much. Truly enlightening, and actually also one of the topics that we work on most is the whole aspect on polarization. Polarization of society in terms of health literacy, digital literacy, wealth, etc., etc. So thank you so much for this perspective as well. So, Mr. Poon, I would also like to invite you to introduce yourself and your point of view in relation to today's topic.
Thank you, Tamira, and I hope everyone's having a good time at this session today. I am the director of the Lee Kuan Yew Center for Innovative Cities, where we've been looking at future of work and future of innovation, as well as impact of society for the last 10 years. Maybe my quick opening remarks revolve around three things we've observed in those 10 years. I would call them maybe paradoxical, pessimistic, optimistic views, maybe POP, paradoxical, optimistic, pessimistic views. The first is that we've got a lot of artificial intelligence now, and I like to put forward the case that the more artificial intelligence that we have, the more we learn about our own human intelligence. For the longest time, we assumed that creativity and empathy were just the province of humans. We've learned that has shifted a little bit. Case in point, in the research that we do in the Lee Kuan Yew Center, one of the things that we notice is that, yes, AI can be creative, but they tend to be creative in a limited way. They can generate lots of ideas very quickly, and they can generate many, many ideas in 30 seconds. But around the 20th or 30th idea, they start to sound about the same. What humans are good at, and where human intelligence and creativity are good at, is at the extremes. We have much more diverse ideas, including lousy ideas, but really, really good ideas. And so the challenge for us will be that how do we combine the two to get superior intelligence, superior creativity for the solutions that we are trying to tackle as human beings? So the first point would be the more AI we have, right, the more we learn about human intelligence. And I think that's worthwhile striving after. The second thing, thinking more broadly, digital is not just about AI, but really is about all the whole gamut and spectrum of technologies that have to do with databases, algorithms, etc. And I think it's worthwhile remembering that the more digital we become, the more we realize how the world is physical, right? I look at the questions, for example, in the Q&A. I look at some of the prevailing debates about where digital technologies are taking us. We seem to hunger more for social interactions, family life. We like going out. We like big experiences. Even that digital ABBA concert is in a large physical setting. It's a spectacle. It's more physical than digital. And it's about getting people coming together. And I think that's the other thing that's worthwhile thinking about, that as we get more digital, the more we go after the physical. And what does that mean for the way we design what the future of the world that we want it to be will be something that all of us is worth looking into. And then taking that a little bit broader, since we talked about how in the first two questions that Tamira asked, one of them was, what did you not see coming, right? And COVID was one of them. And COVID was a great example, right? We went digital, but we really wanted the physical. We really wanted to see each other. We wanted to go to each other's house, but we couldn't. And I think the other thing that we realized from COVID and the pandemic was that the more crisis there is, and we believe we're in a crisis now of some sort, some call it a poly crisis, the more kindness that we can experience. So I remember giving a talk in the early days of the pandemic that in the first few weeks, there was an unleashing of a latent reservoir of kindness, people reaching out, helping each other. And I remember telling a friend and saying in that conference that I hope this never quite goes away. I know it will go away when we get busy. It did sort of go away, but it's worthwhile remembering how kind we were to each other in the early days. And it tells you what a latent reservoir that is. And if somehow we can learn to tap into that, I think we'll be in a good position. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That is also a very, very good point indeed, that the more digital we become, we are actually craving for also
the physical,
having the connection, right?
Yeah.
And I completely agree with your point on being even now being in a period of crisis, polycrisis or whatever you can call it, but there is a lot of friction, a lot of tension, and a lot of uncertainty, and we also see that reflected in people and their reactions and how we try to navigate that in terms of also trust that Ms. Subashini was also mentioning. So thank you so much for this introduction. And then I will leave the last introduction, but again, not the least, to Mr. David. Please welcome, and looking forward to hearing about you as well.
Yes, thank you very much for having me. David Timmis is my name. I'm based in Brussels, Belgium, originally from Romania. Do you have any Romanians here? And maybe to just add to what was mentioned about my sort of background, to position myself in the discussion, because I think we're all very complimentary, and I really enjoyed the interventions of the previous panelists, and of course your presentation, Tamira. So I see that a very fortunate position to have been working for 4 years at Google. She started working at Google in 2016, right the year in which Sundar Pichai has famously repositioned Google to be an AI-first company, which, to be really honest, and I can't say this now, I'm no longer working with Google. It's been a while. Nobody even at Google understood what it meant. We were all like, AI first? I mean, what's this about? So this was 2016. And at the time, I was managing Grow with Google in Romania, which is Google's largest reskilling program. So I had the front row seat into seeing how AI is slowly but surely becoming a topic that we were teaching young people and entrepreneurs about. Definitely not enough at the time. It was still early phases. But long story short, I was drinking the tech Kool-Aid of AI is a force only for good, and there's only benefits to be had for basically until 2019, 2020. And as a side note, recently I was sort of viewing on the talks I delivered over the years, and came up, and I will share a link to my LinkedIn post, because otherwise click on the YouTube one, probably you'll also hear it. And the fascinating part was that I still delivered this talk while I was at Google. So I was reflecting how I spoke about AI, its impact on skills and work, 2019. And I can say there was one thing, as I mentioned also in this post I shared, that I got wrong. Luckily, I'm accompanied by some really large individuals, the likes of Mark Zuckerberg, Sundar Pichai, Elon Musk. Basically, nobody could have predicted how fast AI will develop. The ChatGPT moment, everybody by surprise, let's be honest. Even Google, who developed the technology behind the Transformers paper, was not really ready for such a wide-scale adoption, and obviously didn't want to launch a product that would potentially disrupt their own business. So that I got wrong, because in 2019, I was fairly relaxed about the impact of AI, thinking it's something that will come within the next 4 years. What I got right, and I think what's relevant up to this day, and I think it's one of my key messages for you, for all I think for all of us in the panel, in the audience, it's not something to do with age or background, is this idea that in an age in which AI is becoming increasingly more powerful, in an age in which hopefully the digital divides will be sort of crossed and sort of brought together, so we will bridge the gap hopefully in the coming years. I do see learning AI skills as being just a sort of a basic, and that more and more of us will have those basic skills, hopefully. And I already see a trend of people of all ages and backgrounds learning how to use these tools because they're so easy to engage with. Coding is no longer the language you need, it's just language. And yes, prompting is an art. I deliver prompt engineering trainings to individuals, so I know how important prompts are. But at the end of the day, it's never been easier to engage with a new technology. But my point is, and what I think I got right back then, to go back to this talk, is the fact that AI will not be the differentiator for individuals, it will be people skills. And I think that's also a leitmotif of what I think we've all touched upon in this session already, which is the skills that will differentiate average performers from great performers are the skills we all have to some degree. We also all have to develop them probably to get them to an even better level, from communication to critical thinking to collaboration, even creativity. Because yes, creativity definition, humans I think will always pay premium for human creativity, and we already see that happening now. There's AI written books that don't command the same price as a human written book. So that sort of element on creativity, I want to close it here and to just sort of leave a key message that I've again discovered over the last few years and definitely didn't know back in 2019 when I delivered this talk, is that yes, The only constant is change, and AI is advancing faster than any other general purpose technology, because I believe it is a general purpose technology similar to electricity. But that being said, the onus should be for us to, yes, get our AI basics right, but at the end of the day, still do what we were probably told to do 10 years ago, which is to get our people skills right, because that will be the key to, again, thriving and even leveraging AI better in the coming years. So I want to open obviously the conversation as soon as we can, because I'm curious to hear your thoughts. But my message is empowering, as much as I'm much more aware than I was in 2016 of the risks that AI poses to society.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Mr. David Timmis, and really enlightening as well. And I just have to reminded me of that meeting I had with the expert in IoT and AI, where he also mentioned quantum computing, but he also mentioned that he thought the future would be about the magic about being human, and the whole aspect of, you know, if the feel and the touch and everything, where we can feel that we're part of a world that is physical as well. So it's truly inspiring what you're also mentioning. Now, Freya, I just want to make sure that we have time for a question before we hand it over to the audience in the participants.
Yes, go for it.
Yes, we do have time. Good. I would like to ask you, what do you see as the key opportunities and threats for our everyday lives and ways of living in, you know, the current, we've been talking about the poly crisis and, you know, being in period of crisis, but in the current state of affairs, where do you see the opportunities and where do you see the threats? And now I guess it will also touch upon what you already mentioned, but just if you can make it maybe slightly briefer than your introductions, but I would really love to hear your point of view. If we should start with Mr. Poon, would you like to comment?
Yep, certainly. I like to pull two of the threads that I mentioned. One is how much of our world is physical, even despite all the digitalization. And two is the expansion and possibilities of using our human creativity and knowing where our human intelligence has an advantage. We have examples where we work with the community, with vulnerable segments of the community, where we teach them how to use AI. And when I use AI, I'm referring to multimodal AI, not just using text prompting. The reason that is important is in the same way that if you are an intern and your intern can only do Microsoft Word, you're not as effective as if you know how to use Excel, you know, you use PowerPoint, you know how to do a Google search engine, and so on. So multimodal AI is empowering to help the vulnerable workers. And we've helped them to find jobs, help them to build bonds with the community and with their children. So one example that I have is we taught somebody who is a platform worker how to create her own AI assistants to not only help improve her own life, but also to secure new jobs. She got so excited by it, she picked it up, learned new things, got new jobs for herself, and then decided that it was important enough for her to teach her own children how to build these AI assistants. And then she built an AI assistant to teach the children how to build AI assistants. So these are not stories you hear often because the media doesn't usually report on such stories. But these are stories we see very often in our work on the ground in the community. And I think that's where the hopefulness and optimism comes from.
Thank you so much. Very good point indeed. And maybe over to you, Ms. Subashini, if you can also reflect a bit building on Mr. Poon's comments.
Sure. So really just to add to what King Wong was saying, I think the opportunities are from where I sit threefold. And I think that's digital and financial access. I think we have the technology. Mobile will be an even bigger accelerator. So, and this will help bring millions of people into the digital economy, and therefore then access to essential, right, tools, services, and better lives, especially in Asia with the growing middle class. I think this will be key to ensure that this rapid growth is good growth. So massive opportunity for inclusion, for sustainable economic growth there. AI for small business. I think there's a massive opportunity there too, and more solutions are coming, especially generative AI, right? So if we can enable small businesses to figure out how to use that well, there's incredible improvement in efficiency, I think, that we'll see, and they'll be able to reach wider markets, which is an issue for resilience today. right? So I think really that would be a fine example of tech for good, and there's a huge opportunity there to level the playing field. And a lot of what we do every day at the center is around this. The third, I think, across both of these and more broadly, is just more human-centered design. And I think it speaks to David's point around this need for connection. And so to be able to really deliver on that need, we need to get even more radically intentional about human-centered design in the solutions that we bring. The big challenge that I think we all know, and maybe we don't speak to it enough even now post-COVID and where we are with the Paris Agreement, is climate and livelihood shocks. I think that's very real. And while on the one side we need to over-rotate on digital and to bridge that divide, there are these very real other elements that are also not stopping for anybody, and to be able to connect the digital opportunity to address some of the climate shocks and livelihood shocks that we're seeing, I think will be so important for us to be able to keep this, vehicle moving in the right direction in terms of just humanity's progress. The unequal digital and AI uptake. I mean, I've spoken a lot about it already, so I won't dwell on it. But to me, that continues. On the one side, I think there's an opportunity with inclusion on the digital and financial access side, as well as AI and small business. But the reality is today it is unequal. And that doesn't really bode well for peaceful societies. So I worry about that. And I think in the medium term, we also can't, we talk a lot about technology, but I don't think we should underestimate, as the gap widens, the cost of living pressures. And we're not solving for that either. So how do we keep a healthy society moving in the right direction is the question I think we need to be asking. It's a very practical, everyday threat, I think, to peaceful societies today, tomorrow, and as the divide widens also in the future.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I know that this group also had, the last session was on environment, but I think you have a point indeed in terms of what might be the effects on our ways of living and also of working and where we will be working, right? So Mr. David Timmis, would you like to contribute to the points?
Sure, and I'll try to be brief and complimentary because already many things were mentioned, and to just start with the macro very quickly. And I did share another LinkedIn post because that's how I process some of my LinkedIn posts, and this is specifically from the World Economic Forum, the organization, at least two of us, if not even more, amongst the panelists and organizers are connected with, on global risk, which for me was quite eye-opening for a few things, because obviously climate, we can all agree, is probably the biggest existential risk to humanity in the mid to long. In the short term, it's obviously war. We see what's happening in many places in the world, and also not just traditional war, but warfare is something that we should all be looking closely at. Healthcare-related issues, definitely COVID was an eye-opener for many, how a pandemic can still, not medieval times, but even in today's times, cause a lot of damage, and that we're not prepared for such a, or hopefully we're better prepared, but we were not in 2020. AI is the risk I'm most focused on and concerned about in the, I would say, 3 to 5 years, because of things to do with everything from the acceleration of misinformation and disinformation. We see deep fakes, so videos created with AI becoming even more realistic. We see a spread of fake news created with AI in ways that they tap into or AI is already better than humans to know what with one audience or the other. And for that, it's risk, because in the wrong hands, it could obviously lead, as I mentioned, misinformation and disinformation. So these are all global risk. For the biggest one that it's often mentioned, and I think even here it was more whispered, but for me it's the biggest one, because all of these major risks literally bleed into it, so to say. It's inequality. We see equality being the issue that, if AI takes people's jobs, and to some degree it will transform jobs to be more politically correct, but that means also job option. That leads to growing inequality. Climate change, people displaced because of climate change-related disasters breeds inequality. War breeds inequality. So a lot of these global risks breed inequality. And for me, the untapped issue globally, and the issue that come to bite us if we don't take care of it, if we actually what the UN has said many years ago, and still probably to leave nobody. because I think we have already potential to use AI to grow as a civilization. The goal will be how do we spread the benefit widely, because we already see the potential for create unicorn businesses, so business at over $1 billion with 10 to 30 people. There's at least a couple examples that come. There's huge opportunities, as my co-panelists mentioned, improve access to education, to coaching. I'm a career myself, and I was surprised, but maybe surprised as also an AI expert, how my career coach demands have dropped this year for the first time in years. And I definitely put it on AI, because I use AI as a career coach as well, and I'm a career coach myself. So this is, the technology that has a lot of power, but as I mentioned earlier, so now in my answer, with a lot of risk. It's almost like with two sides. Yes, it increases access to content, which is benign, but we've seen in recent months, of especially young people, using AI for mental health advice, and they're not trained this. And I'm referring to the general purpose now, because yes, there's AI tools being developed by therapists, which are still not perfect, good direction, but no, most people have access to ChatGPT or Google Gemini, and they ask these tools questions that are definitely not suitable for an AI tool that has not been trained to give sort of medical advice. So AI is like all the other risks, or like a coin with two sides, and the goal will be to make sure we focus on the positives and mediate the negatives, and to spread the benefits as well as possible.
Thank you so much. And I think that was a very good point indeed, also in terms of trust, the issue of trust that we've already touched upon today. What will inform that, and what are the uncertainties that will inform people's trust also in the application and use of AI in everything we do. Freya, I think maybe we are turning towards the participants now.
Yeah, we have a lot of questions coming in. I'm having a look through, I'm keeping an eye on what's here. Maybe we start with a couple that I've sort of grouped together on this, following this point about balancing with still needing physical contact, but also wanting to connect online. Mr. Poon, your point here on how much the craving for physical contact, but also the benefits of connecting online, but also then balancing the antisocial behavior or the digital risks, the risks of being online, the behavior in the digital world. And also, I think there's an interesting point on the generations that have been coming through. There was the COVID generation. So there's this term of COVID babies who, had very little socialization in their first couple of years, but also those who entered into, higher education institutes, but they were fully online for the first couple of years, right? These impacts. So maybe we bridge these topics of how do we encourage the physical space when you've had limited interactions, but also how do we ensure well-being in the digital space? Tamira, Mr. Poon, anyone who wants to comment on these topics?
Well, I find the whole aspect of actually using generations super, super interesting. Like I said previously in my presentation, there is something where we need to be aware of also what is informing, the formative years of a generation growing up. Nevertheless, it's also very important to stress that a generation is still some kind of rigid construct, right? But when we're looking towards that cohort of people being born or being very young in at school and going through education during the pandemic, this is definitely something where we're also seeing the research data now appearing in terms of mental health and also their digital skills, obviously. And I'm sure that there will be vast differences when it comes to the digital divide. And I don't know if you know more about that, Ms. Suprichini, and in terms of, the effect of the well-being of this younger generation and also their digital access.
So what it's a great question, actually. What we're seeing is that it's very mixed depending on on where we are and where we're operating, right? In some markets, just the arrival of mobile and COVID itself became, sort of an accelerator of exposure to that and adoption, as even low-income communities and children in those communities started receiving education through mobile, right? So their familiarity with it became much more, and that had negative impacts on the access for women. So in the hierarchy, you would have women who ran home-owned businesses who are now, so first it's the male member of the household, then it became the children for education. So the woman who's both the householder as well as earning a secondary income got the phone use of digital last, right? So we saw some of these other unintended consequences of that, but exposure to the younger generation. In terms of the inability to interact socially, I think it was a very different reality in different places. Like in a city like Bombay, it wasn't so impactful because just the setting itself was so dense that there was only so much they could control. In Singapore, they sent the children back to school very early, and they did a very successful job of it. I think in some sort of high-income parts of the UK, for example, it wasn't the case, and you'll be able to speak better to Europe than me. It really wasn't the case where we held them back a little bit more longer. I think Scandinavia did a better job. So I think the impact on young people is very hard to make a comment on sort of really, the access and what it did or the lack of it at certain periods of time and what it did to those generations. Different context has had different impacts on young people. But I do think, we are coming past it now. And kids are sort of back in school. And I think I think we on this topic, we meet at a good moment where I think some of those impacts, we are overcoming them and having people back in the mainstream. So I'm not sure, like I would say much more on that, except maybe the one sad thing to say is that we also learned some good things through that period. And we're seeing some of that unravel, even in corporate culture. Like quality of life was better with some amount of remote working. In many parts of the world, that is now reducing. It's come from 2 days a week to 1 day a week. And in some sectors, like consulting, people are back in office 5 days a week. It's become this issue of how do you justify infrastructure that exists today vis-a-vis what we know we should be the right direction towards 5.0, right? Like we have learned some things from that improves the quality of life, more balance, is more cost efficient, and yet we're not maintaining the policies that we should for that better way of working and better way of engaging, including dragging kids into school 6 days a week in some countries, right? Like we are some of that reversal, I think, is what's sad and to note more than the impact on young people itself today.
A very, very interesting point indeed, and also the whole the importance of understanding what context and the differences in how the measures taken, because just for Scandinavia, in Denmark it was very, very rigid and strict, and in Sweden, just across the bridge or the water from us, very open. So completely different impacts and how we chose to deal with it, right? So and I also think it's the everything you mentioned about the good things that actually also came out of it, like Mr. Prune also mentioned the kindness that you noticed in the beginning of the pandemic. I don't know, do you wish to comment, Mr. Prune, on the question that Freya posed?
Yeah, certainly. So let me tackle this at different levels or different domains in our lives. First is the future of work, which I know there are some questions, so I can take those questions at the same time. We have had the conviction for about 4 or 5 years now, after having done 1,000 over hours of observations how people work in trading, manufacturing, railway infrastructure, and command centers, that it is wrong to fixate on skilling and future work as an individual-centric endeavor. So much of the conversation is about what will you learn, how will you stay resilient. But if you look at anything around us, the cities, your companies, your communities, they work because many people are working with many people, working with many machines. And so what we have done in our future of work research, as well as future of innovation research, is to take an interaction-centric view of the world. That means if we start thinking of the workplace as our communities, as our cities, as places of innovation where interactions are thick and where we build interactions and where technologies are used to enhance those interactions, we will be better off for it. Why are we better off for it? Because extend that a little bit, we had a think tank in Europe come talk to us and say that, when you start talking about interactions, we're talking about communities and social capital as well. And that is precisely right. If you build the capacity to be working with each other well in the workplace, there's a good chance that it would either come from the values of the community and the country, or it would have transference to the communities and values of the country. So taking an interactions view of the world instead of the individual-centric view of the world is going to be critical for us to have a thriving future of work, as well as how you manage the digital versus the physical. Because interactions, if you focus on that, would encompass both. You cannot have one or the other, and the two go in combination. The second thing is, if you take interactions view of the world, it applies to the community as well. We did a piece of research a few years ago on digital societies and what it meant for the future. We noticed that everybody yearned for a sense of belonging. The definition of community was where they felt they belonged. Interestingly, because of digital technologies, the idea of community and sense of belonging had become both bigger and smaller at the same time. They felt connected to people around the world, but at the local level, they want to be connected to smaller niches. And we pointed out in a recommendation we made to the funding agency that most communities, countries, and cities do not have capacity to fund and support such smaller niche community support groups. But what if we could? We could be having a very thick blanket of different communities, different definitions of belonging, interwoven to create a stronger society and a stronger capital. And then lastly, extending the interactions view to the domain of schooling for young children as well as parents. We just finished an interview with a parent who said that he was bringing up his child, and the child said, "Oh, if AI can give me the answer, then I don't need to talk to my classmate for this team project." And the father decided very astutely to stop her from doing that and say that, no, if your teammate or your classmate is not catching up, your job is to help the person level up and not just rely on the AI. So go down to the younger levels, it is our responsibility as adults, as those who are a little bit older, a little bit more mature, a little bit more aware, to guide the younger generation, those around us, towards the right value system. And that's a responsibility for all of us.
Thank you so much, Mr. Poon. And definitely, I guess for all future generations, there is a part of the whole digital literacy that we need to be able to have a certain kind of structure, or as older generations, and as an educational system, or even a work system. Mr. David, do you wish to also comment a bit on maybe also some of the things that Mr. Poon mentioned on the whole interactional aspect of applying?
Yeah, just very, very briefly, if I maybe on both what my panelists have mentioned, this idea that I think COVID was such a pivotal time for many people for different reasons, but especially for the younger generation that was still in primary, secondary school, even high school, very formative years. Because some of the studies I've shared here in the chat, so one, there was an article from the Financial Times. Even if it was just a couple of years of disruption, both in terms of learning experience in particular, engaging with your peers was highly disrupted for some young people who, if they were not already extroverted enough or comfortable enough in social settings, they basically, some of them in some cases went an even deeper rabbit hole. And the last study I've showed was from the UK, which it's almost like the perfect storm. So during COVID, there were those who were already vulnerable and not having the chance to socialize really put them in a difficult position. Then came AI and generative AI, which provides anybody from the comfort of their home with the best friend, the perfect sycophant who doesn't contradict you, who always tells you you're right, even if in some cases you're wrong. And that has a risk of indeed, beyond what I mentioned already, of young people asking for mental health related support from AI, which I think is a big challenge, or will be a big challenge in the coming years. There's, I would say, equally important challenge, and I think this is something that was mentioned earlier as well, of young people not developing at this crucial time of their life these social skills that will then be key for them finding a partner. Because we see, and I've just seen yesterday, I think a statistic in the US, it's a historically low number of young people in their 20s or 30s who are married and settled down with a home that they own. These will all, again, trickle down to more inequality and more unrest if these issues are not solved or at least mediated by policymakers. And beyond relationships, it's also finding jobs. So it's also connected to employment, because how do you get a job these days? I was just early this morning seeing a LinkedIn message from a LinkedIn post from a friend saying that she has all these certificates in the world. She used to work at Meta, but she's now without a job and she's struggling to find one despite being even over. I think potentially in her case, and she's not the only one, the idea of you getting a job based on just the CV and the certifications is not enough, and it has never been enough. It's always important to network, to socialize. But again, for that, you need to spend more time offline than online, and more time speaking with real people than with an AI who never tells you you're wrong. So I think, again, I'm focused on young people, but this can affect all ages and backgrounds, but specifically young people, because their social skills related muscles are not as developed maybe as somebody in his or her 40s or 50s. They are particularly at risk if they don't forget that, yes, AI can be great at helping you with certain things, but if you end up seeing yourself spending too much time conversating with it and getting into a rabbit hole, wake up and get out, because it's really easy. And maybe that's one downside of the coin I didn't mention in my previous answer, was that, yes, AI provides us with these incredibly, tutors if we need them, or career coaches, but AI is also augmenting the capability of social media tools in particular, and not only now AI chatbots that could really take us in a journey, in a fantasy world, so to say, that it's very hard to escape. They really captivate our attention like no other technology. So as long as we're mindful of this risk and take digital detoxes from our conversations, albeit interesting conversations with AI chatbots, I think we'll be safe if we take this measure.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, David. And I think all of these topics that are being brought up by you and it really reflects also the whole, everything that Society 5.0 is also about, right? Especially the human-centeredness and the integration of the digital and the physical. Freya, do we have time for another question? Or
yes, I think we have time for one more question before maybe some closing thoughts from all of you here today. And exactly on the topic that you just brought up, Tamira, on the bigger picture, perhaps there's a question related to, how are we balancing both the economic advancement and innovation with the technology, but also remembering, especially in the context of people and work, remembering these aspects of inclusivity, ethical decision-making, sustainability. And a bonus question here that I want to add on, which was a question asked on, if we're looking at this next stage of society, normally we measure development and growth in economic terms, but if we're integrating these things, technology for social good, for social impact, and more human-centeredness, also on the aspects of we discussed today on balancing, offline connectivity, what should we be measuring instead in this next stage of society when it comes to development and growth? So a couple of questions there on inclusivity, sustainability, ethical decision-making, and innovation versus innovation. And what should we be measuring, Tamira and our panelists?
Yes, I think I will actually be leaving the floor to our panelists. I've been talking a lot myself. So, Ms. Subbashini, would you like to just briefly reflect on this, please?
Sure. So what we've come down to, the World Bank released its Findex report last week, right, around just financial and digital inclusion and all of that. And so where we are in our mind space right now is the one thing that we really think we should be measuring is financial health. Mm-hmm. So if we think about one indicator that can then connect to a bunch of other things that eventually mean quality of life, and that means dignity for everyone, that's financial health. So it's no more about access, it's no more about just jobs, formal or informal, it's not just about a bank account, it's not about a mobile phone. It's not about just internet connectivity. It's all of that leading to good health. And we're talking a lot about physical health. We haven't achieved that for everyone, but we are of the view that we're not talking at all about financial health. So we should think about that, because resilience and to thrive, it's sort of at the center of things. So my answer is financial health. That's the metric.
Great. What a great final remark from you. And Mr. Poon, would you like to comment on that as well?
Yeah, I like to measure self-efficacy if it was possible to measure it, because if you can raise the level of self-efficacy and you can get a high level of self-efficacy in the population and the community, then I think we're off to a good start. People taking responsibility, helping each other out, and making things happen.
Thank you so much. And Mr. David Timmis?
I'll use the angle I'm using, which is the work or employment related. And for me, it's no longer focusing on how active we are with or without AI, but how much our jobs are actually meaningful and how much our well-being is improving. You see a lot of discussion nowadays in the tech space, and many economists commenting on the impact of AI in the productivity statistics. Most say not yet. Some say we will not even in the years, but not enough. Smart people are wondering, are jobs actually getting better with the use of AI? Are they becoming more meaningful, and our well-being is? So I think we got our metrics wrong, and if focusing on GDP and productivity only and not well-being and meaningfulness, we will not be in the best position in the coming years. But I do hope, and on a positive note, that as I think Mr. Poon mentioned earlier, AI does push us all to reflect on what makes us human and double down skills and traits that make each of us unique.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think those were really good points for to take with us. Financial health, self-efficacy, and the whole aspect of more meaningfulness and well-being in this society 5.0.
Yeah.
Freya, do you have anything?
I want to ask a sneaky final question, which is we have an audience full of very young, talented, passionate young people here today. What sort of advice do you have for them, or key, the future of their work and their careers is very uncertain. How should they be planning for their lives, thinking about their lives? Yeah, key messages that you want to leave with them, all of us today.
Mr. Subashidi?
I'm happy to go. Okay. Trust Freya. So I think 3 or 4 things from me, right? And we've discussed this. So maybe just in a nutshell to say, prepare for dual realities. And we touched on, sort of operating both in the physical space and in the digital world. It will be both. So to be able to feel comfortable to embrace AI, data, digital tools, but never to lose sight of human needs and context. And I think that message was made very loudly by my really esteemed co-panelists, more than me. And I think that's really important, because we need to balance technological fluency with empathy. And if we don't have the human connection, we're not going to be building that empathy. And so the ability to lead in this new and shifting reality will be greatly diminished if you don't sort of develop both sets of muscles. The second, and this is very personal to me and our work, is in everything you're doing, my request more than advice would be build for inclusion, right? I think early and often about access, affordability, and literacy. World peace depends on it. So I think we need to bring the end user into all development conversations in whatever element, or sector you're working on, and to design solutions that work for everyone, and to use your power and influence and your intelligence to do that. I just came off another session, and we talked a lot there about, a bunch of senior leaders, but talked a lot about lifelong learning. When I graduated university, it wasn't a thing. You sometimes did, but it wasn't a thing. But now, we know that we have to continuously educate ourselves. So early in your career, I think a mindset of just investing in lifelong learning will bode well for just sustained success, I think, and resilience. And finally, the one thing that's personally served me very well, because so much has changed. I graduated university in 94, so you do the math. So much has changed. And what's kept me steady sometimes rising, sometimes, it ebbs and flows. This is life. But what's kept me steady is that everything I've done is anchored in purpose. So a technology without trust or a solution without social legitimacy, it just can't scale and it can't endure. So I would really strongly advise to always lead with integrity, transparency, and just a commitment to everyone, everywhere. We are one humanity. So I think if you anchor your actions and your work in purpose, you'll be fine. Come COVID, come something else, come AI, come Gen AI, you'll be fine.
Thank you so much. Couldn't agree with you more. Mr. Poon?
Yeah, so just a quick one. I once read that the path to wisdom is to have strong beliefs weakly held. I think it's from an organizational scholar or a futurist, but I think that's really useful, right? Have strong beliefs weakly held, strong beliefs because you want to have some conviction to execute and implement what you believe in, but make sure they are weakly held, because if the assumptions change and if the world changes and you need to change them, you don't become wedded to them and become resistant to change instead. So strong beliefs weakly held.
Thank you so much. That is actually one of the quotes that we also typically refer to.
There you go. Yeah.
And Mr. David Timmis?
Sure, I will just re-emphasize the three I already hinted to. The skills that will make anti-fragile, they haven't changed since AI. That's still people skills, so the likes of creativity, collaboration, growth mindset skills, ability, adaptability, prompting skills, the new one, and two more, which I've reflected on just a month ago, and I made a LinkedIn post about it because I found it was me, so I wanted to share. Learning to learn means the quintessential skills not all of us have the privilege of acquiring as a skill, unless we have a gift teacher or parent that imbues in us that to read and to sort of continuously learn for life. And then the other one, which maybe come as a new even term maybe for some of you, I know there's not, we have from all over the world, it's agency. So it's the capacity to basically take control of your life. That's my message. Even though there's this time we live in which there's so many things happening in the world, there's so much volatility, at the end of the day, go back to Marcus Aurelius said, if it's not within your control, don't spend too much time ruminating about it, but if it's within your control, then don't wait, act. So that's my message, develop high agency and act.
Thank you so much. Freya, do you wish to come with the closing remark?
Well, Tamira, would you like to have any final thoughts on, and leave our participants with your thoughts as well?
Yes, but I think it's been put so brilliantly by all three panelists, I have to say, especially, I cannot repeat the same quote as Mr. Poon, but we all but this is the way that we approach also our investigation and exploration is looking at the assumptions that we carry, the developments that we see, and also look at what are the frictions and the polarities and the uncertainties, and never believe that there will just be one linear path ahead in our lives or in society, but actually understanding that it will be multiple, it might be also a bit blurry at times, and in loops, and being able, I don't know if you can say resilient, but try to train the muscle of actually navigating uncertainty, and be okay. We also typically say we don't see uncertainty as a bug, but we want to embrace uncertainty as a feature. So I guess that will be my final contributions to this, and then a big thank you to all of you and also to the participants here.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Tamira, and to our esteemed panelists for, I think, really an incredibly rich and thought-provoking discussion. I think we could spend a lot longer talking about all of these topics as well. I think it's been really wonderful, but really good food for thought for our audience here to go on and discuss these topics with each other and with their communities as well. So thank you all really so much for your time today. And for our audience, as we wrap up, a huge thank you to all of you for joining as well, and for shaping today's conversations, with your questions and your perspectives. I've seen a lot of conversations in the chat as well. Really wonderful to see. This does bring us to the end of this 3-part webinar series. For our ASEFYLS6 participants, we will see you again next week. But for our wider youth audience, we really hope to see you again soon. I hope you continue the conversations in the future. In case you miss any of the sessions or you want to rewatch these super interesting, insightful discussions, you can catch up with the recordings on our website. Thank you all once again, and we really look forward to welcoming you another time. Have a lovely rest of your day.